Hey everyone, let me just pin the title again. So we're back for part 2. I'll just wait for Chiizii again and then we'll resume the conversation. Thank you again for joining us. Okay.
Hey.
We're back. Click in the comment. Cool, so we'll give it another minute again just for those who were in the conversation to rejoin.
Okay.
That's really interesting because it's like, for me, I've recently picked up like a bunch of books from Zimbabwe, written by Zimbabwean writers, in wanting to learn more, because a lot of my reading, like by African writers, has been majority Nigerian writers, mostly West African, just because they're the titles that I think, for example, like a Things Fall Apart, you know, that's a book that I've heard about for like a long time, or books by Chimamanda, like they're the classic sort of works, like African works. So it's also wanting to hone in a little bit more.
There's also a lot of visibility and popularity on Nigeria, so that's also, which is something that I think, like, I really want to see more can I speak English? Specificity when it comes to African cultures, because I think for a very long time, like even in Nigeria, when people talk about Nigerian culture, or Nigerian religion and practices, what they mean is Yoruba culture, religion, and practice. When people talk about Ghanaian culture and practices, what they usually are referring to is Ashanti. And I just think that going for, I just spilled my tea on myself. But I think going forward, I actually really want to see like more African people like read and learn and amplify their specific ethnicities and cultures and backgrounds, because I'm very interested to see what it looks like when somebody reads and learns about their Zimbabwean culture, which I'm sure even has its own ethnicities and groups within that. And then you go to Congo, and then you go to Sudan, and then you go to Gabon. You know what I mean? It's not every day Orishas every single day of the week. It's not. And it's not every day that the only, you know, when somebody says African authors, people are immediately say Chinua Achebe, Chimamanda, and maybe Wole Shianka.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying his last name correctly, but it's not every day the same 3 to 5 people, truly.
It's that thing of, again, going back to like, we're not a monolith, like we're not just this one group, like within not only within the country itself, as you're saying, like within the country there are several cultures, there are several languages spoken. I think it's important to have that awareness, and when we talk about things, to speak with that specificity. Actually, there was a piece that I saw Shantae J wrote, and it's separate, but it goes back to the point that we're making about language. And she was writing about the use of terms like BAME, like BME, for example. And it's like this just kind of blanket descriptor of such a like diverse and like differing group of people. And I think when we speak specifically, I think you humanize people, and you, again, it's about value and the language that you use to show how you value a person. And I think when you specify, is that thing of feeling seen, like seeing somebody for who they are and not for they're like, we talk about embodiment, like they're signifiers kind of thing.
I think it also gives room for innovation. Like when you
Yeah.
become more specific, or when you look at what you are like specifically connected to, it allows for variation and innovation as well. Because if everybody's just looking at the same reference and doing the same thing,
Yeah.
then first of all, that means that certain histories, languages, cultures get erased after a certain point, and that because you just never know, like if somebody looks at their specific culture, you never know, there's like a teenager or a kid or even an adult or an elderly person who could like look back on something that, you know, is tied to where they come from, take that, futurize it, and create something new. But if they're constantly looking at what's only popular, then we'll never know.
Yeah. And I think it's also what you were saying in terms of, if there's only like 4 writers that we know as like the African writers, it's like you might not connect with them,
Any of them,
and that's okay. And maybe, and it's like it becomes a limitation in terms of if you want to reimagine what it means to be a writer from the African continent, then you're kind of limited because you don't fit into this like box that's been created of this is what African writing looks like. So I think you're right, it does create room for that innovation and freedom to imagine things anew. So going back to our conversation, we were speaking about language in relation to your work. And so I'm going to read out what the title and the question of your master's thesis was. And the title was Fine Art as a Medium for Dietary Information Exchange, a historical look at pre and post British colonial influences on nutrition among Igbo Nigerians. And the question was, what is the difference in nutritional value between the pre and post-colonial diets practiced by Igbo Nigerians? What cultural practices, if any, were lost, altered, or introduced due to the colonization of the Igbo diet? And what I really appreciated about the fact that you were even asking that question is because when we were talking with Olivia, we were talking about the power of inquiry. And so we started our question with this quote that I'm going to read. And it's by Panache Chigumadzi, sorry. And as I was just talking about reading more work by Zimbabwean writers, this book is a book called These Bones Will Rise Again. And she was writing about the fight for Zimbabwean independence and the spiritual mediums. So Mbuya Nehanda was one of them who led that liberation. And so she was wanting to learn more and ask questions more about that in terms of the way that history was written. So the quote is, there are many questions and I'm looking for answers, the kind of answers that slip past the facts of history books or analysis by pundits and experts. Instead, the answers I need are answers to politics that are about how we live, hope, dream, cry, pray, and believe. As I search, I realize that if I want different answers, I need different questions. And when we're talking about culture and identity and value, and for you wanting to understand how did my people live prior to colonization? What were the sort of cultural like practices in terms of like diet? And I wanted to know what led you to start asking those questions and looking for these answers, and how you've been enriched by that.
Okay, by you asking me this question, I think I remembered why I even did this project to begin with. So I realized that emotional eating was my way of coping with like trauma and stress and like horrible things that happened to me. And then I started thinking about the fact that Black women, especially older Black women, especially like, you know, aunties, are number one demonized for their emotional connection to food, and that it causes, or consumption in general, and that it causes health. Like when you start thinking about aunties that are like 35 and up or around 40, almost every single one has a health issue. Almost every single one. And I was like, why is that? You know? And so I looked at the fact that I have an emotional eating is my coping mechanism for food, and how that affects people, or Black people, African people widely. So if I'm eating all of these things and it's making me sick, why is it in my vicinity to even eat? You know what I mean? Like, why if I'm eating healthy things or things that are around me that are meant for me, that are good for me, surely this wouldn't even be happening anyway. So that's when I started looking at pre and post-colonial diet, because there are a lot of things that African Black people eat and consume that go against our genetic makeup, period. Like, it's not even a matter of like debating about it or being like, oh, period. Like, that's just what it is. So one of the things that I found out was that 70% of Black people worldwide don't have the gene to break down lactose. So just about none of us should be drinking or consuming any type of milk or dairy at all. Now, you can start looking more at different regions. So for instance, like if you go more towards Northern East Africa, they have a higher tolerance for milk and dairy. But their genetic makeup and their regional history is very different to West African regional history. If you start looking at countries specifically, 99% of Ghana does not have the gene to break down lactose. 87% to 99% of Nigeria does not have the gene to break down lactose. And it makes a lot of sense, because if you go to either country, you will not find fresh milk. You just will not. All of the milk is powdered, tinned milk. Can I speak English? Anyway, tinned milk. And even when you look at a lot of like West African diet, I can't really think of much, except for like when you start looking at like Hausa and Fulani cuisine and diets. I think those are the ethnicities and groups that I know of that contribute like dairy and milk, because they are the people in Nigeria and Ghana who raise cattle. So they work more closely with milk. But the rest of us, I can't think of a single Igbo traditional food that has milk in it. Not a single one. None of it. And then looking at other things, like the way that we break down sugar, the way that we break down wheat, and then looking at people from different regions. Like if you look at Eastern Asian diet, it's very rice based, but rice is something that is native to where they're from. So it makes sense that their genetic makeup finds it easier to break it down. Whereas like when you think about West African people, I think there's one rice in Nigeria that grows and it has like brown spots. And that's kind of like the best rice for us to eat if we're going to continue eating it. But if we're eating imported rice, white rice, it's probably not the best, because if you think about the fact that, okay, a lot of our diet post-colonialism is rice based and rice starch heavy. And that contributes to a lot of health issues that we have. Then I started looking at the things that were good for us. And like my mom was telling me about how insala soup, which is something that I've eaten since I was a kid, is something that after every single pregnancy she's eaten, because it cleans the blood and clears out the womb. Had I not did this project, I would have gone my whole life, maybe until I decided to have a child, and I would have never known that, like ever. Or stockfish. Stockfish is very popular in Nigeria. A lot of people use that in soups. The reason why stockfish is popular is because during the Nigerian Civil War, during Biafra, when Igbo people in the eastern side of Nigeria were starved and blockaded, like Swedish, Norway, those regions would give aid. And within the aid, they would give food that could withstand the temperature and the climate of the regions. One of those things was stockfish. So we started making soup with stockfish, like egusi. You can put stockfish in anything, really. But that's so something that we now consume, like, is nothing. Everybody will be going to the shop and be saying, go and bring the stockfish, go and buy the stockfish. Did you buy stockfish? It's not even something that even 100 years ago that we were consuming like that. Right. So, yeah.
Okay. So at which point, because you started the Igbo vegan page, which you use to sort of document kind of like lifestyle overall, because it's not just food that you document on the page. You also like make your own like skincare products like toners. You document the restaurants that you're eating at, grocery shops that you're shopping from, and like herbal tea combinations that I was talking about earlier. But did you start this page around the time whilst you were learning these things in order to document your journey?
No, I actually started this page, I think in like 2014, a long time ago.
Okay.
And then I think because, like I said, like I had gone through a breakup, all this stuff, it took a lot of energy out of me. So I wasn't really even posting that much or consistently on that page for a while. And then this year I was like, I probably should start doing it again, more so to keep myself accountable on like what I'm eating and look at like where I'm going, and so that I have memories as well, because sometimes I want to remember, like if I travel, where did I eat and where did I get something, and if I post it on my Instagram, that means that I will see it again and I'll be able to remember more. What was the other part of the question? I'm sorry. Or did that answer the question?
So the other part of the question was just, like why you created the page and how it connected to like this information that you were learning. But you answered that. But I think also going back to the point of language was it a conscious decision to specify like the Igbo vegan? Because at that time, if it was in 2014, were there as many Black people? Because now there's quite a lot. Like I follow quite a few people who are Black vegans that are documented, whether it's like Caribbean, like African, and so there's more representation of the way that you can be vegan and still eat like cultural foods. Was there that then?
Yeah. So basically, it wasn't as big as it is now at all. And initially, I wanted my name to be the Nigerian vegan, but there is, and she's amazing actually. Her page is really, really lovely. But there's another person who has that name already. So I was like, okay, what else am I gonna have? And then so I just put the Igbo vegan, and I thought, again, like language and being specific, I thought it would be better to put that, because if I now go and look for Igbo vegans on Instagram, I'll probably just only see myself, if I have to be honest, or I might see like one other person. There isn't that much specification, and I think the reason that is because we're still globally getting more comfortable with like our identities that are within Blackness but are not only Black. So a lot of people will put things like the Black vegan, Afro vegan, like terms that are wider, that, you know, connect to like Black people globally as a whole. But for me specifically, I think it's just like I'm always looking for specifications on things, because otherwise I don't really know, like, how am I supposed to know? Like, and I specifically want, like you said, like eating Nigerian food, eating Igbo food specifically. Where am I gonna find that information? So I guess I kind of just started to make it. Although there are some other people who are Nigerian vegans who have pages on Instagram.
Yeah, because I think it's really, really great. So I remember at the time, because I've been vegetarian since 2015, and then for maybe about, I'd probably say 6 months, I was kind of in between vegan and vegetarian. Now I'd say like my diet is pretty much vegan. Like it was the cheese, that was the thing that was I kept coming back to, but I just had to cut it out, because like you were saying, every time I would eat cheese, breakout, and I was like, this can't run. You can't do this anymore.
Gotta go.
But I was so grateful, because like there were so many people that I could look to and like follow. But then when I speak to like family about it, and they're like, so what do you eat? Or like, what can I cook for you? And I'm like, you can cook all the same things you were cooking. You just remove the milk. And most of the things, like you were saying, don't even have the milk anyway. So I was just like, it's the same. I just won't have meat. Or you'll just make the stew and it'll just be a vegetable stew. And so it was really amazing to then see like the breadth of, like, there was like Rachel Ammer that I followed, and she had like a plethora of videos. And I was like, okay, cool. I can do this here. And then it becomes fun, because like we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, where it's like each one teach one. And then it's like, I'll go home and I'll cook for my family. And they'll be like, and this is vegan. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, it's vegan, you know?
But I also want to say, I feel like, I don't know, I guess, like I said, I have no idea what language they used back then to describe allergies or diets. And if allergy was even a thing, I really don't know. You know what I mean? But vegan to African people, to Black people, sounds like a very like Western white word to them. So when it always shocks me when people are like, what do you eat? I'm like, I eat the same thing that you eat. There's just no meat or milk in it. Like, if you're making jollof rice, you don't have to put any meat stock. You can just actually use like fresh herbs or dried herbs or whatever. You don't actually need any meat stock. If you look at a lot of Igbo food, like akara is naturally vegan. a lot of soup that Igbo people eat traditionally is not even cooked with the meat inside of it. You know what I mean? Like it's not. It's cooked separately, and then you put the fish or the meat in it when you're ready to eat. A lot of rice. We have like it's just so I'm just like, I know this seems like a very far-fetched thing to you, but if you're eating oatmeal in the morning and the oatmeal has berries and water, that's a vegan breakfast that you just had. If you're eating avocado and you've only sprinkled, because some people just eat avocado by itself and you only sprinkled olive oil and so that's vegan. Like it's not really that, you know, different or otherworldly.
Yeah. It's so interesting again on that point that you say that, because then I think back to some conversations that I've had with my dad, and when he speaks about growing up, because where they grew up in Zimbabwe is my paternal side of the family is like the rural like area, so it's a village called Chivu. And so when he speaks about how they used to eat, so like my grandparents had like a farm, so they had like cattle, they had chickens, but they grew like vegetables, fruits, like potatoes, everything, like grains, the brown rice, everything. They grew it and would eat it fresh. And when he's, for example, meat, and he speaks about meat, and he'll be saying that like, oh, we didn't eat meat all the time like that. Like it was like an occasional thing. And for example, in Zimbabwe, you use peanut butter a lot. So like green veggies would be cooked in peanut butter and things like that. And I was like, okay, so you're eating greens, and do you realize you're getting your protein through the peanut? Like you weren't eating these things. And so then now obviously coming here, I remember him saying to me explicitly, and he was saying, you know, but like I have money and it's like that I can afford to eat the meat kind of thing. And it was more about that. And then, but then also what's interesting is because when I went to South Africa and I was going to go to Zimbabwe as well, and people say to me, how are you going to be vegan at home? And I'm like, the access to the fresh food is so much more available and organic at home than it is here. And it's funny when we think about a lot of the superfoods that are kind of marketed like vegan things are natural. So I remember in my Trapped Fruits London box I got custard apples, and I'd never heard of a custard apple before, and I took it home to my parents last week. And my dad was like, custard apple, what's that? And then he opened it, he was like, Charisse, I used to eat this fruit as a kid. And so with him it's called maroro, that's what we call it. And then he was talking about baobab, and now that just used to be a natural thing. And there was so many of these fruits that he didn't know the English names for, but only knew the Shona names for, that he would eat growing up as a child. And I'm like, well, these are the things that they're selling in Holland and Barrett's for £10 as vegan super. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like these, then he's like, okay. And it's like, it's not foreign, but we just don't have the language, again, makes it seem like it's this far away thing, but actually it's so native to who we are and how we eat anyway. But it's like what you're saying about the difference between pre and post colonial. So that's it's interesting. It's very interesting. Okay, so the next question I wanted to ask is, given everything that we've discussed, what are some other sort of everyday rituals and practices you have for wellness, whether that's like physical, mental, emotional? And hold on, Chadwick says they're rebranding our culture and selling it back to us. Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, what methods do you use to keep track of these practices, and how do you hold yourself accountable?
Okay, so like I said about, there was like that one transit last year that put an emphasis on routine and health and daily habits for me. This year I realized that I needed to get back to it, because there was a lot of, it's very easy to get knocked off of those things because life can be very crazy, and because we are living in a white supremacist capitalistic world, you know, it's really easy to get knocked off that. But what I started doing was making schedules. So I have like weekly schedules, and I have a morning routine schedule. And the reason why I do that is because, like I said, the way that I process information is a little bit all over the place. And because because my mind can get very overstimulated very quickly, and because I'm always thinking about things all the time, it's helpful for me to see things out as what I need to do and order of importance. So I have a morning routine schedule where I try and take a walk every day, and I've been trying to like make sure that I hit like 10k steps when I take that walk. The first thing that I do when I wake up is hydrate, because it's very like, especially with quarantine going on, but even before then, it's very easy to get up and think, I have all these things to do first. Yeah. But I actually need to like make sure, if I don't drink my water and take my vitamins and eat, then I will probably pass out before I can do those things. So I'm not helping myself. If I think I'm going to be able to do those things without eating and taking care of myself, the joke is on me, truly. So I have to do those things. I don't do it every day, and I would like to, but I try and make sure that I give myself like 10 minutes to sketch, so that I have like, I've drawn something, I've exercised my hand, and I've exercised my talent as well, in the beginning of the day. And there are a couple books that I like to read in the morning, almost like a morning devotional, so that I can do that before I start getting on social media and my mind starts getting all like boggled with information and stuff like that. And one of the things that I was doing really well before that I need to start doing again was that the first 2 hours of the day is without social media. Right. Because I've realized that the more that I keep scrolling and looking at things, I think I get tired during the day easily, even though it's only this part of my body that I'm using. But constantly scrolling, I get sleepier and tired earlier, and the tiredness is more like strenuous on my eyes and like on my energy. So I try and have the first 2 hours without social media. What else? And then like even within my weekly schedules, like I try and schedule in like lunch and all those things, because if not, then I'll just say, oh, okay, well, this deadline or this piece of content that I need to edit I need to do it now. When it's like there's nobody's chasing me. Like, actually, nobody's actually chasing me. The world will not crumble and end if I don't do it. It doesn't mean I shouldn't do it, but let me make sure that scheduling in food is just as important as scheduling in the thing I need to get done. Yes. And then recently, I've been like making sure that I am on the phone with my family every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's great. So the last thing is, again, it's a caption that you wrote, and it was about what we were speaking about in terms of embodiment and being in alignment, our spirit being in alignment with our vessel. And so the caption was, I'd like to never think about what my image looks like to anyone else, to never think about whether I'm presenting femme enough, whether I'm suppressing my masc energy too much, what that says about my feelings towards desirability, about my face in comparison to someone whose is always flawlessly beat, about how when people first meet me, they can see I'm an artist, and how that informs how they engage with me. What ideas and images my accent rings off in people's head, good or bad, but I don't live in a vacuum. And the reason why this caption stood out to me is, like I was saying, that thing of when our spirit, I guess, if we believe that is who we are, that is our personhood, that is the thing that's living and existing, and that when we come into this world, we are born into our body that comes with all of these signifiers. And so sometimes there are periods where you find yourself in conflict between who you understand yourself to be and who the world perceives you to be, and how you find alignment with that and find peace and begin to feel at home within your body and begin to experience those conflicts less. And I guess my question for you is, do you have any rituals or practices that help you to feel anchored within your body or at one within your body? Or is that even a thing at all? Because it might not be.
Physical activity definitely helps me do that. I've realized that, like, even if I would like to start getting back to it, but I realized I really like physical activity that exhausts me and is almost like a show or signal of like strength. So when I was younger, I used to be on a wrestling team in school, and that was because my school didn't have a rugby team. I really wanted to play rugby. I don't really know why, but I was watching rugby players and I was like, this is really great. But the next best thing was the boys wrestling team, so I joined that. And like, physical activity that really tests your endurance and your strength, I just really, 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 really love it. So I try and at the very least physically move my body around so that I can do that. The other thing is that ways that I feel grounded in my body. You know, when I see other people, who are themselves, and when I see older pictures of me really inspire me a lot, because I was like, wow, I was really 14, like really the baddest babe in school. Like I was really wearing whatever I wanted to wear, and was like, you know, this is it. This is how it's gonna go. This is what's going on. Like that's it. There's nothing else. And the quote that you read out, when I made that quote, so I started dating people with identities that I didn't know I was gonna date, if that makes sense. And because of those identities, like, okay, the community that includes those identities, there's markers for everybody. So there's masc, there's femme, there's high femme, there's soft, there's so many different things. And because the people I was dating before weren't a part of that community, like there wasn't as much of a question on my womanhood or where my womanhood fit into, if that makes sense. And then when I started dating those people and being like more like, because it's one thing to be in those spaces, another thing to like be an active participant where you are one of those people. Do you get what I mean? So now that I was one of those, now that I had accepted that I was actually in that community, I was like, raw, okay, like if I want to date this person or I'm interested in this person, then the questions of what my marker is are going to come up. And then also people are going to think I'm a certain way because of what I look like before they even ask me. Some of that was like self-imposed thinking. Some of that was like actual like reality. And then, you know, I was dating people that I wanted to date, and I didn't fit their regular or stereotypical, what do you call it again? Type.
Right.
And I was like, the more and more that happened, I was like, I don't, like, this problem is not actually a problem. Like who I am and like how I identify and what I look like is fine. Like, regardless, I still have the drip, I still have the sauce, so there really is no problem. You know, people still like me, you know what I'm saying? No matter like how I am and all of that stuff. So I was like, there really is no problem. Like, I was stressing over this and making it something that I thought I had to change and look more like stereotypically femme. Because what I realized is that I don't really like, prettiness is not something I associate myself with. I like looking like me, which when I think about the words that come up is like cool, like eccentric, intentional, thought out, very like artistically driven. But pretty is not something I associate with myself or my work. It doesn't mean that people don't call me that, but it's not something that I'm ever like trying to be or looking towards or trying to emulate. I just it's not really something that I like. But during that time I started thinking about it more. Do I look, oh, I'm not presenting as pretty. This doesn't look pretty. The way that I put myself together is more, people are taking it as artsy and edgy and different, but nobody thinks there are people who are not, you know, immediately thinking it's pretty. And because of desirability politics and beauty standards within any community, but specifically that one, prettiness was capital in it. So the more that you're pretty, the more that you're like stereotypically pretty for what that ideal is, the more that like you can navigate with power or ease or choice, let me say, or perceived choice. So that's the reason why that caption came up, because I was like, I'm trying to do this thing, but it's really not working. I don't really like it. It feels very flat. And then it got to the point where it's like, I actually don't need to do this because like I'm still that babe. Like I really don't need to do that. So
yeah. So what was would you say that, so what I'm thinking of is this Toni Morrison quote that Akwaeke Emezi uses often in relation to their work, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's essentially that about when you exist on the margins, and even rejecting that notion of the margin and claiming the margin as center, and then saying to the rest of the world to meet you at your center? And would you say that when you started asking yourself these questions, then you had that realization that's like, I don't even need to be doing all of this, that you just were like, okay, I'm Chiizii. This is how Chiizii presents. This is how Chiizii feels about how she presents. And those who wish to be in my space will meet me here. But I'm not going to be in this conflict of...
Yeah, because the truth is that I think I'm cool as fuck. That's the reason why I was like, I don't need to be like extra high femme. And I also don't need to erase like whatever masculine energy I have, because it comes... I actually have a lot of masculine energy, and if it comes out in how I dress or how I navigate or whatever, then that's not a problem, because I truly think I'm like one of the coolest people. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I think I'm so...
No, but you should.
Like, no, seriously, I think I'm so cool. Like, I really think I'm that girl. Like, really, really, really true. And I think everybody should think that.
Yes, 100%.
But so, and like, I have to remember that I also think that there's something about, because I was raised in America and then moved to London, I think there's also something about conforming and reservedness in London that, if you're not careful, can catch you, and you start practicing as well. The good thing about British culture is that it can be used to refine things. So if what you do is very eccentric, and you move to a place like London, or you like engage with like London or British culture, it can help you to understand how to refine things. But if you take too much of it, you will start making yourself too small, and you won't talk as loud anymore. And you'll start, if you wear too much color, you start wearing nude and black and gray. You know what I mean? You'll start making yourself really, really small. And I was like, I'm from New York. I don't do that. Like, I just actually don't do that. I'm also very Nigerian and very Igbo, so I wear color all the time. And I'm just, you know, just popping and all that. So whose problem is that? Like, so for me, I just was like, okay, do I want to continue being cool, what I think is cool, or do I want to like get what I think I want? Because even when I started dating people that I thought I wanted to date, it was fun. And then I was like, actually, this is not it, because there's still something that's not fully meeting me. So it's managed to meet my exterior, but it hasn't actually managed to meet who I am as a person, which is not, it doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that it's not compatible. Right. So I think that quote is really true, because a lot of the people that I look up to, that I think are amazing in terms of artistry, music, writing, politics, all of that stuff, they've always been very much themselves, and people have always met them where they are, and not only met them, but celebrated them for who they are.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah, that's really poignant. I think your what's this comment? That's so true. It can start to feel like you're disappearing. I often feel like I need to work hard to be myself. I hear that fully, because like for me, that's something that I've spoken about it a few times in this series, that like within the last year, like when I turned 22, I said to myself that this year was going to be a year of like fearlessness. And I think for me, I always felt very hyper visible in my body. And so it meant that I often shrunk, because I didn't like what came with that. Yeah. So it's like I shrunk in many ways. It will be in color. Like, so I'd wear muted tones that weren't loud, or I'd wear clothes that were baggy so that you couldn't see what was going on, like in terms of like my shape or anything like that. But it just meant I was so aware of the different, like the way that the gaze on me changed depending on the spaces that I was in, or the communities that I was in. And that also was a conflict, because there are some spaces where there's a gaze on you that's like very sexual, and there's some spaces where there's a gaze on you where it's just like you're too much. And then so it's like I was constantly in conflict in figuring out like how everything I felt about my body was always in relation to the voices and that gaze. And so it was really a process of coming to a point of like, how do I identify with my body? Like how do I present in a way that channels and unapologetically expresses me, like my energy, and also in the fact that that can change, like it's fluid. Some days, you know what I mean, I might feel like you're describing as like femme, and other days I'm like, I want to wear a tracksuit with my hood up, and then that's
and it's
that,
all
and that,
you. It doesn't matter. It's all inside of you. It's all you.
Exactly. So I think it's definitely, it's a process. And for me, it was like, my thing was, I think Tanya Compass uses the phrase "exist loudly" a lot, and I really like that, because it's just this thing of, I wanted to step into the fullness of myself, and literally, so succinctly, is like, whoever has a problem with that, that's not my problem. That's exactly, and it's such a liberating point to get to, where it's just like, I'm here, this is my center, this is how we do things here. You want to get with the program, or you can,
the door is right there, honey. It's
exactly
up to you. It's really up to you.
Yeah.
And I actually think that experience that I had of like dating people with different identities was really good for me, because now I definitely, more than before, I definitely don't center men's opinions on anything at all, like period. And even like when I walk in the street now and how I dress and how I move, like I know that men are still there and they're still looking at women, and they're still, I don't like, I really just, I don't care. Like, it's really just not my problem at all. And even people with different identities, none of it is my problem, because I'm focused on my goal, right? And my goal for my life is to be myself and to be like the best version of myself. And that includes, like, I really want to be a rock star. I want to make an album, and I want to tour, and I want to flip off of cars with fire in the back. And with that, there's going to come like the most bomb wardrobe and the most bomb views and looks, and just hair if I decide to grow it. So if I really plan on being a rock star, I need to, there's no way I can be caring about what everybody on the street thinks. Not now. Not while I have youth and energy on my side. And if I want to, I'm planning to, I am a designer, but I'm planning to like continuously establish myself and release clothing and garments and collections. If I'm going to do that and allow people to believe in the style and the vision and the aesthetic that I have, there's no way that I can do that. And I'm not the first example of that. It's not possible. Right. Like, I know there's a lot of designers that when you look at them, the show goes through, and when they come out, they're not dressed in anything that they made. They're very like, just a lot of times uniform, like t-shirt and jeans. But I'm my biggest muse, if I have to be honest. So what I create gets put on me first. I'm the first model that models it. I'm the first person that markets it. It's me that you associate it with. So if I'm gonna give that to people, surely they should be able to see it, in actual practice on me first. So for myself, I just feel like, if I really want to be like this, like badass, cool person, and I am that already. But if I'm going to maintain that, then that means that what really matters is myself, and making sure that as long as I'm not violating anybody, as long as I'm being respectful, as long as I'm being cognitive of the world around me and how what I do affects other people, then I can continue going forward.
Yeah, and that's it. My mom says, I admire you guys for recognizing these light bulb moments at such an early age, especially pertaining to being in a relationship. It's important not to lose you, the genuine self.
Thank you. Thank you, Auntie.
And that's like so true. I think if we're linking it back to wellness as well, it's like that relationship with yourself is like even what we were saying before about how everything is connected. And so how you operate in one space affects in how you kind of operate in another. And it's like, for me, it's like my relationship with myself at the time where I really struggled with that kind of identity and that self-esteem affected my relationship with food. It affected like my relationship, like even just how the way you walk. Like even before you were talking about looking at pictures of yourself, it's like I can look at pictures of when I was really young and like I had no concern about what people thought about me. I was confident. Then there was like a phase in like my early teens where everything, my shoulders were always like hunched like this. Like it's like my whole demeanor was like embodying these like fears and insecurities. And it's like, so when you step out into the world, you step out to the world with that like head bowed down. And so you're meeting people with that head bowed down, and you're welcoming people into your space without your chest stood tall. And it's like, how does that affect what you bring or who you bring into your space? How does that affect what you accept into your life? And if you're eating in order to modify your body, how does that affect your relationship with food? Like, if you're not eating to add to nourish, to benefit, but because I'm afraid that if I eat this thing, then I'm going to be like this, or I need to eat more of this so that I can change my body to be like this. And all of these things are, it's like, when you come back to that point of like, this is my center, everything else that I bring into that must be enriching and adding to this space. And I can only do that when I have that value and that thing where I can, you know, like walk with my head held high. And so for me, that's how that links to wellness. And I love what you said even about physical activity, because even that, it's like, when I was saying at the time I felt very hyper visible in my body, it meant that I would shy away from a lot of like sport and things because I didn't like that like attention that comes with that. So it's like, you would want to do certain things but not. And so like my relationship with sport was really like difficult. And like now, like last year I started learning to swim, been doing yoga, and you just, it's this thing of feeling present within your own skin. At the end of the day, this is my vessel and I only have one, and I'm this me and her for the rest of
in it. And then you actually
life,
get to live, you get to try things, you get to do things. I think that's something that I really do. One of the things that I've been learning recently is what to take from the different places I've lived in and the different cultures that I've been a part of. And for me, like, I used to just be like, America is like the worst, the absolute worst. But one of the things that I really do respect about growing up in America, specifically in New York, you know what I mean? Where like, there is if you grow up in New York, there's a confidence that you will have by virtue of that region that can actually allow you to kick down any door, seriously. Because there's a lot of things that I'll be like, oh, maybe I'm not sure or whatever. But even though the way that I walk out, the way that I like physically walk on the street is very much like energy that I'm not, if you thought you were going to try me, it's not me, it's somebody else. And then when I also think about the fact that I'm Nigerian and everybody in Nigeria wears color, everybody's loud, everybody makes noise, you know, like, it's just, why would I not take up space? Like, specifically women, Black women in both America and both in Nigeria take up a lot of space. And it hasn't been easy for either groups to do that, but they've forcefully taken their rightful space and are still fighting for their rightful space in both regions, but have taken that space. So how dishonoring would it be of me to not, like, you know, move that forward and use it when somebody has probably suffered for me to even have my tattoos and talk the way that I talk and my bald head and go to uni to study so there was somebody, you know, back in my lineage that couldn't do that and spoke up against it, and now I can do that. So I need to continue being myself, because there will be somebody after me that can use me as a reference for continuing to be their self, no matter what they look like.
That is so true, because it's like, even my mom being in the chat, we had a conversation not so long ago, and she was saying that the way that you live, Charisse, some of the things that you do, like, I could never have imagined myself. Like, you have this boldness that I could have like dreamt of, but I couldn't have imagined myself living or doing things in the way that you do. And even this quote that I read that time, where it said, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And to literally, it's important to remind ourselves of that it's like, our existence isn't just this thing that just sprung out of nowhere, and we also don't exist in a vacuum, but there is a journey that has led to us becoming here. And I think, especially when I look at, like, I've got a little sister who's 7, and the way that I present so much, like, I notice even now how she comments on that, like me coming home with like my bald head, and she's like looking at me and she's like, because she understands like people with long hair and was really like obsessed with that for a period of time and wanted to have braids all the time. And then she's like, you shaved your head? And I'm like, yeah, I like it like this. And she's looking at me and she's like, okay, kind of thing, you know? And it's like, I want you to see that. I want you to see that, because one day I might come with a wig. The next day I might come with my braids. But today I decided that this is what I want to do, and that's okay. So I'm showing her the possibilities of who she can be, how she can present. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, my sister, I have a younger sister who like used to copy everything I used to do, and she has her own style. But I do think it's important that like, even if her style is not anything close to mine, she has the option to go further than what I look like, or you know, use it as reference. And the same thing with my mom. My mom says all the time to me that she feels like she's very proud of me, my womanhood outside of me being her daughter, and that she feels like, you know, she says the same thing, that a lot of the things that I do, she wishes that she had the guts to do it back then, and that I've done it much earlier than she, you know, has in her life. So hopefully my sister that's younger will be able to do it much quicker, and she already has. There's a lot of things that she doesn't, there's a lot of gazes that she doesn't center in her life.